So as usual, we start our lessons with prayer because we believe it all starts and ends with prayer. It starts with God and ends with God. So I can see Meiosis wants to lead us in prayer. Please say a quick short prayer so that we can start. Meiosis?
Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for this day. I thank you for the gift of life, O Lord Father. Guide us as we are going to study. Help us understand each and everything that we are going to study, O Lord Father, so that we can put it in application, O Lord Father. Help us not to cram, but to understand, O Lord Father. I thank you for this day. In Jesus' name I've prayed. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Meiosis. And we also pray for a stable network for each one of us so that nobody loses out on the discussion. Okay, that out of the way, I think let's get to the chase. Let's start the lesson. So previously, we were talking about meiosis in our previous lesson. And this is just a summary of the process of meiosis. This chart shows us the summary of the process of meiosis. We saw that meiosis is a type of cell division where 4 daughter cells are formed. As you can see from this image, there are 4 daughter cells that are formed here. And what is unique about it is that the daughter cells have half the number of chromosomes as those of their parent cell. You can see in the beginning, the parent cell had 2N, where it was diploid, and then eventually the daughter cells are haploid. They have N. So it means that they have undergone meiosis. So meiosis helps us to form haploid cells. These haploid cells have a special name. We call them gametes. So meiosis is important in gamete formation, or what we call sex cells. So in humans, it forms sperms in the male and then egg cells or ova in the females. In plants, it's a different naming. In plants, you have pollen grains for the male and then the embryo sac for the female. So basically, that's what we discussed. Then we also said that meiosis has 2 divisions. You have the first meiotic division and then the second meiotic division. So if you can see here, the first meiotic division begins with prophase 1, then go to metaphase 1, then anaphase 1, and then telophase 1, which is followed by the cytoplasmic division, what we call cytokinesis. Now, these 2 daughter cells that are formed at the end of meiosis 1 enter the second meiotic division, which begins with prophase 2. So these 2 are in prophase 2. Then each one of them goes to metaphase 2, then anaphase 2, and we end with telophase 2 and cytokinesis. So for those who are not around, we also said that what makes meiosis very unique is that okay, can someone turn off their device? I'm getting feedback. We're saying that what makes meiosis very unique is that there is recombination or crossing over that happens during prophase 1. When these chromosomes, what we call homologous chromosomes, pair up, then they form what we call bivalents. I'm just giving a quick recap. For those who are around, for those who are not around, I'll urge you to go and do some further reading. So we see that there is crossing over. If you look at this image, okay, and then look at the image afterwards, you notice that these red chromosomes and blue chromosomes have other colors on them, and that's because there was crossing over. Segments of homologous chromosomes broke off and attached on the other chromosome. So that's what crossing over is all about and results in variation. Then we see that afterwards, these chromosomes align at the equator or at the metaphase plate. They are all lining up there. Then now they are separated by these spindles and they go to the opposite ends towards the centrioles. Then after that, the nuclear envelope forms around them, and then we see that the cytoplasm divides, so that now we have two daughter cells, as we can see here. Then we enter the same story, except that now here we no longer have crossing over. There's no crossing over as we saw in prophase 1. We just have these chromosomes thickening and becoming more visible. Then they line up at the equator, and then they are separated by the spindle fibers. And then now here we see the separation of chromatids. Here we saw separation of chromosomes. Actually, in anaphase, the homologous chromosomes are pulled apart, but in anaphase 1 and in anaphase 2, we see that actually here, the sister chromatids are pulled apart. So that is something that is very distinct. So that's basically what we discussed last time. Eddie Russia, please stop annotating. So that's what we discussed last time. We discussed the significance. So in case you're not sure what it was, you can go and check the YouTube. There are these recordings are there on YouTube. You can talk to Mr. Kaziba, who will give you guidance on how to access them. All help resources are put on YouTube and other platforms, as you'll be informed. So that was last time. Now we need to move on to the next subtopic under this topic. If you recall, I could just give a flashback on our learning outcomes. So just a moment, okay. This is the front page. So these are the expected learning outcomes. So we have dealt with learning outcome 1. And now today we want to look at learning outcome 2. We are going to seek to understand the concept of inheritance using genetic diagrams. So this learning outcome requires understanding and application of some skills. When you see the U and S in the brackets, it tells us the level of competence you should exhibit, okay? So we expect you to have good understanding of what inheritance is about and be able to illustrate that using genetic diagrams. And then, of course, when we are done with that, the next thing would be for us to understand and explain sex determination in humans. If God allows, we will do that. And then lastly, understand and explain sex linkage in humans. But for today's discussion, I'm going to put all the emphasis on number 2. And then this will be dealt with another time, hopefully, by your teachers. Okay, so let's move on to today's lesson. All right. So last time I asked you to tell me what you know about heredity or inheritance. Let us see if people still remember what was said or have ideas on inheritance. Can I see by show of hands what is inheritance and what is heredity? Can I have the class leader help me out on this? My class leader, help me choose the people who have something to say or read what they have said in the chat. So the question is, what is inheritance? What is heredity? We asked that the last time. Hey, the class leader left the meeting. Thank you, Ruth, for alerting us. Maybe I need to get another one. Let me see if I can get another participant to take on that role. Divine K has raised her hand. Yes, Divine. Please share with us what you have for us. Divine K, I can hardly hear what you're saying.
Heredity is. I am answering heredity.
Yes, please.
Heredity is the process of transmission of genetic characters from parents to offspring.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
that's
you.
heredity.
Thank you, Divine K. I just got some of the things you said. It's a transmission of characters from parents to their offspring. Someone is wondering what topic this is. This is the topic of inheritance. It's an S4 term 2 topic that we are discussing. Okay, anyhow, let's move on. Now, you'll find that, as Divine has said, that heredity is all about the transmission of characters. Okay? Transmission of characters from their parents to offspring, or what we call traits. Okay? What we call traits. Now, because people observed that characters or traits are passed on from their parents to their offspring, then they came up with common beliefs and common sayings, okay? After making certain observations. You know, science comes through observing certain happenings, and then you try to get a hypothesis to explain that what's happening. And then you test your hypothesis and see whether it makes sense. So even the people before science became this serious, even our grandfathers and great-grandfathers, they had a thing or two about genetics, a thing or two about inheritance. So because of that, they came up with certain sayings, okay? And here are some of them. One of them is that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Probably you've heard that. It's an English saying. Like father, like son. Blood will tell. You usually hear court cases about DNA and so on. Or you see someone favoring other people who are related to them. Okay? It runs in the family, a chip of the old block. There should be a chip of the old block. Good stock. You can't escape your genes. I don't know if you've heard such sayings before. Have we had these sayings before? And what do we think inspired people to talk like this? Can we explain at least one of the sayings? Anyone wants to try to explain any of these sayings? They are common words in English, what we call idioms. If you can't speak, you can still post in the chat. Chintu, this is English. Okay, the topic, this is biology, but we are teaching some things in English language to help us understand the biology. So can you pick any of these sayings and just say a thing or two about them? Yes, Ria? Pick any.
For me, like
choice.
father, like son. Like father, like son. In my own understanding, it may seem to be like you have the same characteristics like what your father has. Characters, like your behavior, you have the same behavior like your father.
Okay, thank you, Ria. That was good. Do we have any other contribution? Okay, Galesco has already also talked about like father, like son. Or maybe I give it to you as food for thought for you to think through. But I could pick like number 4, and they say it runs in the family. You have seen families which have traits or characters that are similar. Like you see the shape of the head of all members of that family. So it means that the trait for the shape of the head is passed on from one member to another. So you find that maybe in a certain family, all people are tall, or all people are short, or they all have a certain character. Okay, so we can say that character runs in the family. It means that that character is passed on from one generation to another. And that's one of the ways they can tell who belongs to their family or not, because they always pass on the character. Okay. Then you also had sayings, a chip of the old block. Yeah, Techno Mobile, please rename your device. I don't want to call people by their devices. What do you have to tell us? Please unmute. Okay, let's have Chills. Okay, like I was saying, a chip of the old block would mean, you know, when you have a big piece of wood and then a small splinter or a small piece of wood breaks off, that wood tends to have the same characteristics as from that from where it came. So there's a high tendency for us to behave like our parents or to do things like our parents because we have inherited the genes from them. Then when we say good stock, this one is usually used by farmers when they look at a breed of a cow or a goat or sheep and it looks good, then they can be sure that its offspring would equally produce the same characters. So that's why they call it good stock. So you can keep it and you'll be sure that you always get the same good traits as that has given you. Yes, iPhone 11 Pro. Please share with us what you want to tell us. Please, when you raise your hand, kindly go ahead and contribute when you have been asked to contribute. Okay, Bridge. Let's hear from Bridge.
Thank you. For me, I would prefer to talk about the saying which states that the apple can't fall far from its tree. This means that a child or an offspring will exhibit traits or behaviors which are similar to those of their parents. For example, they may say that she's just a great singer like her father. So that's an apple which can't fall far from its tree. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridge. Let's take one more person. I think that was Andrew. Yes, Andrew.
Thank you. I want to talk about, according on my idea I have on this saying, is like you can't escape from your genes. Suggests that our genetic makeup has a significant influence on our traits and the characteristics and even our destiny. Well, it's true that genetics play a role in shaping who you are. It's essential to understand the complex of the relationship between genes and the environment. So that's it.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. I can see people are warming up. Okay, let's just keep it at that. Other things can be shared in the chat. All right, now let's start with what I had. So when we are discussing inheritance or when discussing genetics or heredity for that matter, there are certain words that we need to familiarize ourselves with. And this is a list of the most commonly used words in genetics or in heredity. One of the words is chromosomes. There in the discussion, alleles. Then we have dominant. Then we also have recessive. We have heterozygous, homozygous, phenotype, genotype, F1 generation, F2 generation. We have words like crosses, hybrid, selfing, crossing, and so on. So it's my hope that by the end of this lesson, we will have understood all these words as they are listed here. Because if you don't understand them, then it's very hard for you to discuss the genetics satisfactorily. Okay, so we are going to begin with the first word. Those are chromosomes. I'm sure it's not a totally new word to you. You probably used it before. You probably misused it, but I'm hoping that today we will understand it. I'm sure that when you were discussing growth and development, you came across this word for the first time when you were discussing mitosis. And then when we discussed meiosis recently, we also talked about chromosomes. But before I share with you what I have on this concept of chromosomes, I would like to find out what you think chromosomes are. So what are they? Where are they found? What do they do? What's their role? Okay. So can we make this as interactive as possible so that we can all stand to benefit? So what are chromosomes? Where are they found? Someone who's called user, please
chromosomes
tell us
help
what you know.
determine someone.
Louder, please.
Help determine the child's gender.
So he says they help determine child gender. Is that all they do? That's true, but can we have some more? Let's hear from Andrew.
Chromosomes are thread-like structures made up of DNA and proteins that carry genetic information in the nucleus of living cells.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So there are thread-like structures that carry DNA. Okay, not NDA. DNA, and we find them in a nucleus. That's very true. And they carry traits of organisms. Yes, Ruth, Namakula, then Rosette.
Yeah, I'm going to answer where they are found. There are two types. First of all, there are two types of chromosomes. If we are talking about the system in the human beings, the X and Y chromosome joined together is in the male, and then XX chromosome in the female. So when the two nuclei join together, they form the Y chromosome. The male have both X and Y, and then the female has X. So in determination of the gender, if the Y is the lucky chromosome, it fuses with the X in the female, it forms a boy. And then if it's XX, it forms a female, if I recall.
Okay, thank you, Namakula. Rosette, I'll clarify some misconception after. Yes, Rosette?
Yes, in my opinion, a chromosome is basically a thread-like structure. It's in form of a thread, if you have to remember. So chromosomes are thread-like structures, and they are found in the what? They are thread-like structures. They're found in the nucleus of living cells, and their role is to carry genetic information, and they're in form of genes. And then also they are made of nucleic acids and proteins. So that's how I would define a chromosome.
Okay, thank you all for your contributions. Yeah, to a large extent, you're all right. Now, Namakula, there is something that I want you to understand. There are not just two types of chromosomes in the cell. Okay, there are many chromosomes in the cell, but depends on which organism you are considering or discussing. Now, for the human, we have 46 chromosomes. Those are 23 pairs of chromosomes. Now, of those 23 pairs of chromosomes, only one pair determines the sex. The rest of the chromosomes do not participate in determining sex. So we call those autosomes.
So how many pairs?
So the autosomes are the non-sex chromosomes. They are the non-sex chromosomes. I'm going to type the word somewhere here. So we have autosomes, which are equal to non-sex chromosomes. But then we also have what we call the sex chromosomes. So you have two sex chromosomes. As Namakula said, if you have both X and Y, then you are female. You are X and Y, you're male, and then X and X, you are female. Okay? But now for today's discussion, we are not going to discuss the determination of sex. That's for another time in the future. Today, we are going to just discuss how other traits are transmitted from their parents to their offspring. Okay? Tabby. Tabby. Yes.
Teacher, I'm just requesting for pardon on the number. You say that of the 23 pairs of the 23 chromosomes, there is just one pair of 6 chromosomes.
Yes, humans have 46 chromosomes. Or we can say 23 pairs, because 46 is the same as 23 pairs. But then we are saying that only one pair are 6 chromosomes. Okay, the rest are autosomes. We give them a special name, call them autosomes. So you have 22 pairs of autosomes and 1 pair of sex chromosomes. That's what I said earlier. Okay, now we are going to go to, okay, let's first remove this annotation. We are going to go to the definitions as I have prepared them. So here we have a chromosome. Yeah, Tammy, I'll pick you just a moment. So here you have a chromosome. Chromosomes typically look like this. So they appear like X. Okay. They appear like X's. You have one thing here and another thing here. So this is what we call a chromatid. This is another chromatid. And these chromatids, as you will notice, are joined together somewhere near the middle by what we call the centromere. So the centromere holds chromatids together. And along these chromatids, we have genes. Okay? A gene is a segment of DNA that codes for a trait. So if I have like 20 genes here, it means I have 20 traits that are carried on this chromosome. Okay, so some chromosomes are longer than others. So the longer ones tend to carry more genes than the shorter ones. So the chromosomes are not of the same size. They come in different sizes. So here I have chosen to call the chromosome the architect's blueprint. Some of you may have seen building plans. When they are going to construct a house, they usually get in touch with a specialist known as an architect. He's a scientist who is going to draw the plan on paper. And the plan drawn on paper is what we call the blueprint. So that blueprint or that plan that has been drawn on paper is carrying all the information that the house should look like. Once you give that to the engineer will interpret that blueprint or the plan and translate it into a house. So even in our bodies, we have chromosomes. The chromosomes are like the blueprint of our life. They determine what we will look like, how we will behave, and so on and so forth. What things we can eat and what things will cause us to have allergic reactions. Whether we have dimples or we don't have, whether we have a gap in our teeth or not, whether we have short hair or long hair, all that information is carried on the chromosome. Similar to an architect's blueprint. It carries all the information about the house, whether it will have 10 windows, 1 window, 3 windows, big doors, small doors, how many rooms, and so on and so forth. So that's why we are saying that in the nucleus of every cell lies a set of blueprints known as chromosomes. The definition you gave earlier is the correct definition. And this one, I'm just doing it to help us in understand it at the simplest possible level. Okay. As you can see that, as we'll see later, this chromosome, if we were to unwind it or disentangle it, it will appear like thread-like structures, as some of you said already. So we're saying just like an architect's plan, an architect plans a map, just like architects plan, then they map out every detail of a building. Chromosomes also hold the instruction for the organism's development and function. Now, typically humans have 23 pairs. I think we talked about that already. And each set or each pair of chromosome carries a unique set of genes. Those genes are what makes you different from your sibling or different from your friend or different from your cousin or different from you, from me or different from any other person, because we each carry a unique set of chromosomes, and each of these chromosomes carries a unique set of genes. Okay, so just imagine that we have 23 pairs of such in your every cell. Okay, now each of your parents contributes a half of what you have. So if we are saying that you have 46 chromosomes, it means that your mother gave you 23 and your father also gave you 23 chromosomes. That's why now you have 46 chromosomes. Okay, and there is a picture of a chromosome which has been unraveled or unwound. So you can see that if we were to open it up to the smallest detail, we are going to see that it is made up of DNA. This is the structure of DNA. And you can see that these chromosomes are found within the nucleus of the cell. And along the DNA, we have segments. Each of these segments carries a particular gene. Now, this DNA is so long that it has to be overcoiled for it to fit in the nucleus. Someone has said that the DNA, the length of the DNA is, maybe if you were to straighten it out, it would go to the moon and back. I don't remember how many times, but it is such a very long thread-like structure. But for it to be packed and fit in your nucleus is a marvel of science, a marvel of life. So God created it that way, and it's very interesting. So the genes are the building blocks of life. And the genes are basically the segments of the DNA found on the chromosome. Okay, similar to the individual components of a building. So if we look at a building, like where you are right now, you'll find that the building has bricks, it has maybe windows and so on and so forth. So genes are like those parts that make up the individual. Just like the bricks, the stones, the mortar, the walls, rather the windows, are the things that make the building what it is. So without those things, the building won't look the way it is, or without the genes, you won't be the way you are. And these genes dictate specific traits, right from even your physical features, okay? Like the eye color, or the ability to eat certain things without having any side effects. Okay, let's respond to these people whose hands are up. Let's start with Tammy. The hand was up earlier. Tammy, please unmute. Okay, let's have Rosette.
Teacher, what if I'm to summarize the whole thing and I say that a gene is the basic unit of heredity or inheritance, because that defines everything you're trying to say about the dictating of the specific traits and all.
Yeah, that is a summary. But then when you say it's the basic unit, we need to understand what do you mean. What you said is very correct. That's why I'm taking time to explain it. Tendo?
So, teacher, the DNA is found in the chromosome.
The DNA is what makes a chromosome. When you remove that DNA, then you have no chromosome. And the DNA is what carries the genes. So because the DNA carries the genes, then we say the chromosome carries the genes. So that is basically it. Ian?
For me, I wanted to ask about the chromosome, the definition of chromosome, because I've just, can you please help me?
I'm going to ask someone to volunteer to define for you what a chromosome is, because they had already defined it well. Any volunteer? Yes, Pona?
A chromosome is a thread-like structure found in the nucleus of an organism that carries genetic characters that are transferred to the offspring.
Okay, thank you, Pona. Joel, you want to tell us something? Joel? Okay, let's move on. Please mute your mics if you're not picked on to say something. Yes, same for my Joel.
Chromosomes are thread-like structures made up of DNA and proteins that carry genetic information in the nucleus of living cells.
Okay. Kali, thank you. So that will do. Let's move on. So when we talk about genes, notice the spelling of genes, not like the clothes you wear. Genes is G-E-N-E-S. So genes are expressed in different forms. And the different forms in which a gene may be expressed are what we call alleles or allelomorphs. So they are called alleles. This is a short word for the word allelomorph. So you'll find in some books, they are going to find this word allelomorph like this. Okay, but we always shorten it to alleles, which is also acceptable. So when we talk about alleles, we will find that they could be dominant or recessive. I'll explain what that means in a short while. But to help us appreciate what alleles are, let's think about the gene, maybe the gene for maybe hair texture. So the gene for hair texture could be expressed as either smooth, because of could have smooth, or we could have rough. So some people may have rough hair, others may have smooth hair. Or we could talk about the gene for length of hair. Some people have long hair, others medium hair, others have very short hair. Or we could look at the gene for hair color. Some people have black hair, others have brown hair, others have white hair, and so on and so forth. Among the Africans, we may not easily appreciate the thing of hair, but among the whites, you have people who they call brunettes. We have those ones they call, I'm forgetting the other word. Brunettes, I think. I'm sorry?
Apart from brunettes, there are also blondes.
Yeah, blondes. Thank you. You have the blondes. The blondes are those people. Please, someone who is annotating, you're disrupting the lesson. I'm trying to write something here and you're doing otherwise. So we have blondes, and then we have the brunettes, and then the other hair types. Just for purposes of understanding, just know that every gene expresses itself in many different ways. And that's why we are different. We may all have the gene, say, for eye color, okay? But you find that our eyes have different colors. So the different colors that our eyes have are the different alleles for the eye color. So you find that the eye color is determined by the type of pigment that is in the iris. We know that some people have blue irises, others green, others have black, others brown, others gray, and so on and so forth. And then there are those who don't have the pigment, the albinos. Their eyes appear pink, okay? Because they lack that necessary pigment, and no wonder they struggle when they have a lot of bright light where they are. So that pigment is very, very important for us. Rosette, yes, please.
Yes, teacher. Now I think I'm kind of confused because you said an arrow is like a representation of a gene, and okay, the trait that you gave was color, and then you are explaining the trait, but then isn't I explaining it trying to be like, okay, then your explanation mean like phenotype.
Please repeat your question. I didn't get the last bit of it.
I said, okay, you're trying to explain the arrows, and you said an arrow is a representation of a gene, and then you gave a trait of of hair color. So hair color being that trait, you said, you said some people may have blonde hair, others black hair, and all that. But then isn't that more phenotype, like the appearance of an organism? Then wouldn't an arrow be like, maybe if we are to take the trait as if we are to take the trait as height, then height being represented by a capital T as for tall, then small t as for short, then this capital T and small t would be the arrows for the trait that is height. Then the appearance, the person being tall, then that's what we would consider as a phenotype, the appearance of the organism.
Thank you for your submission. I'm going to clarify. What you're saying is essentially very correct, but I wanted to bring it from this angle. When we talk about alleles, we represent them with letters, but those letters represent something. So if we are going to say like eye color, brown eyes must have a particular letter, black eyes have a particular letter, blue eyes, and so on. Now, of course, when those alleles pair up, as we shall see, the outward appearance of the organism will be determined by which alleles they have pairing up. Okay? Yeah, so if, for instance, we have the allele for brown eyes being represented as capital B, and the allele for black eyes being represented by small b. Okay, let me just illustrate my point here. You see, when we are doing alleles, we usually choose letters. You can say let. Oops. Let the allele, please, let's not hear your background conversation. Let the allele for, say, brown eyes be capital B. Okay, and then the one for black eyes, someone is playing around. I'm going to take away the functionality from you of messing around. Okay, so we are saying let the allele for brown eyes or black eyes be maybe small b. Now you may wonder, why am I saying capital B, small b? Now, these letters come as a result of these concepts of dominant and recessive. So if an allele is dominant, we always assign it the caps, the capital letter. If an allele is recessive, we always assign it the smaller case letter. Like now here, the brown eyes allele is dominant over the black eyes allele, so we give it the capital B, and this one the small b. So it means that when we talk about the eye color, it may either express itself in that population as brown eyes or black eyes. Okay? But for us to get black eyes or brown eyes, it will depend on what each of the parent has contributed to that offspring. For instance, if we have capital B, when each of your parent gives you a capital B, then you'll have brown eyes. Okay? Simply because brown is dominant, and wherever brown is, this capital B, it will express itself. Or if we see that the parent, if we have capital B small b, if we have capital B small b, just a moment, then we are also going to have brown eyes, because like I said, wherever the dominant allele is, it expresses itself. So we are going to have capital B small b, capital B small b, this will be brown eyes. Okay. However, if we have small b, like this, then this will be black eyes. So the blackness of the eyes is what we see, and the brownness of the eyes is what we see outwardly. That's the phenotype. But then these letters that are hidden, or these genes that are within your DNA, are what we call the alleles. So when two alleles pair up, they cause you to express a certain characteristic. Okay, so I hope that helps to explain what was not clear earlier on. But someone has preempted what I wanted to say. That is why I had to do this. Yes, please.
Teacher, just to inform you, I'm your co-host now. But for that chat, there's been complaints coming up from let me see, from around 2:30 by Chirabo Trina. She was requesting for the slide that comes before this one. And then people have been debating through that chat. They were not understanding allele. They were thinking that it's the same as a genotype, because according to who? Let me see. It was yes, Brittany said, oh, you can say alleles are genotypes. Then Jemima says she's lost. Trina, I'm lost. Then who else? This Tammy was also lost. So because you are not looking through that chat. And then who? Ian, he should elaborate clearly. Then, okay. Tendo, Sham, I'm lost. There are very many now who are lost. I don't know where you can begin from, but
Okay, let us try to listen attentively. The challenge is some people keep posting and disrupting others, and also, but now that you're the co-host, I hope this will not be the common occurrence. Now, I'm going to try and pick people from where they were, try to see what I can do.
Maybe let's hear from the two hands. They could represent the large crowd. Benjamin and Tendo, they can tell us where you can begin from. Benjamin, please unmute.
Okay, personally, when they taught us genetics at school, they said, they explained it in a way that a gene carries like genetic information, right? And genetic information is like instructions for the cells to carry out specific functions. And genes, let me say, they are informed, they form a genotype, right? And then that genotype is the one that is characterized as a person's, let me say, character. That's what I understood personally from school. I'm not sure if that's what he's trying to bring out, but
Okay, let's hear from Divine.
Divine, please unmute. Okay.
I think a genotype is like someone's gene. Let's say someone is tall, like how their gene is represented like all together is a genotype. Then an allele is like the alternative of like that gene. If the gene is height, you're either short or tall. So the allele can be capital T or small t. That's what I think.
Okay, let me answer. When we talk, what you said earlier, I forgot to get the name. The one before Tendo.
Charlene, to unmute. Please unmute.
Okay, what I said earlier is still stands. It's just that I think I explained it in a way that got some of you confused. When we talk about genes, as you can see here, there are some segments of the DNA, okay, which determine the traits of an organism, okay? So these segments of the DNA that determine the traits of organism, we said they are genes, but the genes have different ways in which they may be expressed. That's what we call the alleles. For instance, we can talk about blood group. We all have a blood group. Some of you have blood group A, others have B, others have O, others have AB. Okay? Now, there are only 3 alleles that determine blood groups. There's allele A, allele B, and allele O. But you find that we have more than one type of blood group. You have people who have blood group A, blood group B, AB, and O. So there are 4 types of blood groups. But if we are to understand how do these blood groups come about, you'll find that someone is, say, blood group A because their parent gave them, one of their parents gave them allele A, and the other one gave them allele O. So because A is dominant to O, then that person is said to be blood group A. Or both of your parents gave you blood group, gave you allele A. So it means you are double A, okay? Then maybe someone is blood group B. It means that your parents might have given you B, both of them, or one of you gave you B and then gave you O. But some people are AB, meaning that one parent gave you A, the other gave you B, so you are AB. And if your blood group O, it means that both of your parents gave you O, allele O, okay? So that is, in brief, what I can say. But these things will be better understood when we look at the genetic crosses, okay? When we look at the genetic process, then it will make a lot more sense. So please hang in there. Where things get a bit tight is when you may now raise your hand. But for now, let's just try to take the definitions as they are. We are saying genes are parts of the DNA of the chromosome that determine specific characteristics of an organism. And they're saying that these genes may be expressed in more than one form. Those are the alleles. So alleles are alternative ways in which a gene may be expressed. These alleles are typically represented using letters. Okay, you choose letters of the alphabet and then you assign a particular letter to a particular allele. Okay, like say we are talking about the allele for height in peas, rather the gene for height in peas, but all peas are not the same height. Some of them are short or dwarfs, others are tall. Now, why are they tall? Why are others short? It depends on which alleles they possess in them. Okay, so when an allele is dominant, we assign it a capital letter. But if the allele is recessive, we assign it a lowercase letter. Okay, that is, I hope this helps to clarify before I go any further. Namakula, can you tell me what you have there?
Let me see in the chats. Ooh. In the chats, it was just excuse me, just a question from Pon, which you answered. Does blood group AB mean that a person has both AB? Then let me see. Okay, let us hear from Tendo.
I'm asking, what is the meaning of dominant and recessive?
Okay, that is something we are going to talk about in the next slide. We talk about dominant and recessive. But before I talk about it, I want to give you a simple scenario, which you may have seen in your homes. If you're a person who raises chicken and you have cocks and hens, you notice that there's always a cock which seems to beat all the other cocks and chicken together. It's the only one that crawls around. It's the dominant hen, the dominant, it's the dominant bird around the house. So the other cocks will behave like hens because the other one is around. So that's the same thing with the dominant allele. As long as that allele is present, it always expresses itself. What I was showing you here, capital B is a dominant allele. So whether it's present alone or with another allele which is different, it will always express itself phenotypically. Okay, when we look at that organism, the character of that allele always comes through, or it's what we always see. But when we talk about recessive alleles, they always have to be together, like here, small b, for them to be expressed. Okay, so it means that if, in spite of the presence of this small b, the capital B always is expressed, meaning the capital B is a dominant allele to small b. And small b is only expressed when there are two identical alleles. So recessive alleles are those that are expressed only when they are present with an identical allele. But dominant alleles are expressed always, whether they have an identical allele with them or a non-identical allele. So that is how the dominant and recessive information comes about. So if we look at this example here, these are garden peas. So garden peas have quite a number of traits or characters. One of them is flower color, flower position, seed color, seed shape. There are about 7 different characters that were studied on these garden peas. Now you'll find that flower color is either expressed as purple or white. You can't find any other color apart from these two in the garden peas. However, the dominant color is the purple one, and the recessive color is the white one. So it means if we are going to assign a letter for this purple color, we have to look for a letter, a capital letter, say capital A, and this one will give it small a. Okay, because we always assign the capital letter to the dominant trait or the dominant allele for that matter. Then here, flower position. Yes, please.
Sorry for interrupting, but can I interject with this question? What factors determine the dominancy or the recessiveness of an allele? Is it concentration or the parent, maybe the dominant ones are in the male organism and then the recessive in the female?
Okay, thank you for that good question. Now, what determines the dominance is not the concentration, it's not about sex or anything. It's just that way. You find that there are certain genes, as you might have studied or you will study, what we call variation. We have those genes that are controlled by only one gene. We have those traits that are controlled by only one gene. So those genes tend to be either recessive or dominant. But then there are those genes that are controlled by, those traits rather, which are controlled by more than one gene. Those ones, it may just now come to how many of those alleles are present in what combination, but that one is beyond our scope as S4s. In S5, S6, we'll study about polygenic inheritance. But now, for our level, we are going to specifically look at dominant and recessive. So for every character, we will study, we'll look at whether the character, whether the allele is dominant or recessive. We shall not look at the other type of genetics at our level. For instance, when you look at cows, some have horns, others have no horns. So you find that the gene is about presence of horns. So in some, there is a horn, others there are no horns. Or it's about length of horns. Long horns, short horns. You get it? So that means that like in the Ankole cows, maybe, we find that length of the horns maybe is dominant. So you find that maybe short horns is recessive. But in other cows of another trait, it may be a different story altogether. But let's concentrate on these garden peas. You find that the allele for purple flower color, okay, is dominant over that for white. So if I were to say, let's say purple is capital A, and then white is small a, it means that for us to have purple color, we have to have double capital A or capital A and small a for us to have this. And then for white, we must have small a. Because white is recessive, it can only be expressed where we have another recessive allele. Now, why am I saying double this, double that? Remember, organisms are diploid. They carry genes from their mother and genes from their father. So it means that, for example, if this is capital A, it means that mother gave capital A, father also gave capital A. If you have capital A, small a, it means that one of the parents gave capital A and the other parent gave small a. And if it is small a, it means both parents contributed a small a. And that's why this flower appears white. I hope that is clear. Then for position, you find that flowers may be positioned on the axil or axis. Others may be on the terminal end of the plant. Now, plants which have the axil allele for flower position, they tend to carry the dominant allele, and those that have, for them to show the flowers at the end, then it means that they are carrying two small letters, meaning that this allele is recessive. Then seed color, they could be yellow or green, but yellow is dominant. So you find it's easier to find yellow colored pea seeds than maybe green colored pea seeds because this one is dominant. Then seed shape, some of them are round, others are wrinkled. So these are just a few examples. These examples can be extended to other organisms and other traits. So that's why we are seeing here that recessive alleles only manifest their traits if they are paired with another recessive allele, what I have shown you here. And then dominant alleles for them, if present, their trait will be expressed. Masking means covering up the effects of any other recessive allele. Now look at this example here. We have capital B, small b. You would expect that at least the small b will try to express itself. But the mere presence of this capital B will mask the effect of the small b. So the eye color turns out to be brown. Okay, so that is what dominant and recessive is all about. The dominant allele always expresses itself when present, whether as singly or doubly. But recessive alleles can only express themselves when they appear doubly, when they appear with identical alleles. Do we have any other questions concerning that? Any?
Let me see in the chat. Okay, in the chat, Believer, somebody whose name is Believer says he's so lost. Then, okay, the rest people have been discussing and explaining to themselves through that chat. But maybe I'll give the question on what he has not understood. You can type it in the chat.
Yeah, please do.
Then the hands that are
will
up,
always
Queen
tell
Esther.
me.
Okay, my question is still on what is dominant. So, you know how you said about seed color and how it's you are most likely to find yellow peas than green peas. Now, for example, for people, how do you know what is dominant? Are they tall people or short people?
Okay, now let me put a disclaimer on height of people. Height of people is not controlled by single genes. The height of people is controlled by a number of factors. We cannot discuss height of people using this simple genetics. Okay, the height of people is determined by many other factors and more than one gene. So, but in plants, the height is determined by a few genes. That's why we can easily discuss it this way. Okay? Tendo? Okay, let's have Philemon.
Let Tendo unmute.
So teacher, basically, an allele is it a gene or not? It's just an expression, how a gene expresses itself. Oh.
An allele is an alternative form in which a gene may be expressed. Like I said, that gene is for seed color or seed shape, flower position, flower color. That's what we call the gene. Okay? But now when we talk about seed shape, some seeds end up becoming round. That is, if they carry the allele for roundness. Others become wrinkled if they carry the allele for wrinkledness. Okay? So the alleles are just alternative ways in which a gene may be expressed. If we didn't have alternative ways in which genes are expressed, all of us or all organisms would look alike 100%. But the fact that we are all humans, but we have differences, it means that the combination of alleles that we have are what has made us different from
Like
each
I say.
Yes?
So, like, what is the difference between genes and hormones?
Now, hormones are messengers that the body
What is
uses
the
to
difference
control.
between
Please calm down. Hormones are messengers that the body uses to control how it functions. Let's take an example of ADH, antidiuretic hormone. It is a hormone that is produced by the pituitary gland that determines how much water should be reabsorbed back into your bloodstream, or whether it should pass out dilute urine or concentrated urine. So hormones control body processes that way. Like glucose, if it is in excess, then insulin is produced, which causes your liver to convert the glucose into glycogen. Now, chromosomes are different things. Chromosomes, we said they carry the information about you, okay? And when we are passing on, like when you, what can I say? When you look at fertilization, when a female and male gamete come together, what essentially is happening is that the male gamete is carrying its set of instructions, and the female gamete is also carrying its set of instructions, and they are put together in this zygote. But now that we have two sets of instructions, all instructions cannot be followed. Some instructions may be followed, others may be ignored. That's where the dominant and recessive comes in. So the instructions that are coming from the dominant allele are always followed, no matter what. The instructions that are coming from the recessive allele will only be followed if there are other recessive alleles of the same kind. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So when your parents' gametes come together and they form you, you are a product of which genes were dominant or whatever. Eh? All right, but that is again too simplistic. The other details of that genetics can be a little more complex, but thank God for our level, we are dealing with simple genetics, dominant and recessive cases. Okay, if there are no other questions, then I need to go ahead.
In the chat, let me see, there was someone is asking for the definition of a dominant allele and then a what? Recessive allele.
The definition is on the screen, or the explanation. From the explanation, you can get a definition, or you can work with this as a definition.
Okay, let's hear from Divine and then Rosette, then we proceed. Divine K.
I just wanted to explain to the people that are getting confused about dominant and recessive alleles. So a gene is just like a basic unit of inheritance that determines characteristics of an organism. Like a gene determines the characteristics, let me say like tallness. So alleles are alternatives of that gene. The gene is height, and alleles are alternatives of height. Like you can either be short or tall. So to represent these alleles differently, we use letters. So for the capital allele is that we use capital to show that it's dominant. Like even if you have capital T and small t, like physically you'll be tall because you have a dominant allele of tallness, even if you have the short one, but tallness is like dominant, like it's stronger, so you will appear tall. So if you have small t, that's when you'll be short. So like the ones that do not express themselves in presence of dominant alleles are called recessive alleles.
Okay, thank you. I think you have done a very good job. I hope by now everybody has got what it is about. Please let's ask only new things.
I think let's have the hands that I typed earlier on in the chat. Ian and Rosette, if there is anything you have to say, just type it quickly in the chat. Maybe in paragraph form, I'll be able to read it to the class because of time. Over to you, teacher, to take us forward.
Okay, so the questions will come through. Let's move on. So here we have another concept we call homozygous and heterozygous. I called it a genetic duo. A duo is a set of two things. So we have homozygous and heterozygous. So individuals can either be homozygous or heterozygous. Okay? So the genotype, as someone said earlier, is just the set of genes that someone has. So the set of genes that you have will depend on which alleles you have inherited for a particular trait. So if you inherit from both of your parents the same allele, then we say you are homozygous. Homo means same. Hetero means different. So for instance, if one of your parents had capital B, as you can see in the illustration here, okay, and the other parent also had capital B, which they have given to you, then we say you are homozygous for B, okay, but capital B. But if one of your parents gave you capital B and then gave you small b, or the one, your mother gave you small b and your father gave you capital B, or your father gave you small b and your mother gave you capital B, whichever the case is, these are heterozygous. So it means that you have a bit of the recessive trait and the dominant trait in you. So we say you are heterozygous. Like you get a cow, which is an uncle bull, and then you get an uncle bull and then a Frisian cow. You mate them, then you get an offspring. The offspring cannot have all the traits of either parent. The offspring will have half the Ankole characteristics and half the Frisian characteristics. So that individual is said to be heterozygous. For any particular trait you may want to look at, because they're totally different breeds. Then homozygous recessive, we usually call this homozygous recessive because it has double recessive alleles. And we call this one homozygous dominant because it has double dominant alleles. Then we say heterozygous. So this one, we don't say heterozygous recessive or heterozygous dominant. No, we just say heterozygous. So all individuals, all organisms are either homozygous or heterozygous. So that is how those come about. So here I've illustrated showing that homozygous individuals will possess two identical alleles. The key word is identical, meaning they are the same. So can either be dominant or recessive alleles, but they both have to be identical. Like here, capital A, small a, or capital B, small b. So we say that this is homozygous genotype. Homozygous genotype, okay? Meaning that the genes inside here, okay, the set of genes are homozygous because it has two alleles which are identical. But sometimes we have heterozygous individuals, meaning that they carry one dominant allele and a recessive allele. So those ones are said to be heterozygous. At this point, let me take some other questions before I take it a notch higher.
Okay, teacher, I have a question before I read this one for who? For Ian.
Yes.
Mine is how different, in your explanation, you did not include the fourth illustration of a chromosome B, the small b, the recessive B, then dominant B.
It is here.
How different is it, that one? Yes. How different is it from this other heterozygous?
These two. These two are the same.
Okay.
They are the same. It's just that in practice, when we are writing, we don't write like this. We most times write like this. But if you write this, it also means the same as this. They are both, the word heterozygous just means that you have two different alleles. That is all that it means. You may ask the other questions.
From the chat, before you started explaining the genetic duo, who Ian has been asking, he says that he has seen people with 6 fingers. So what he wants to know, that is it brought about by the genes or something else? He's requesting for an explanation on that.
So 6 fingers or 6 toes is what we call polydactyly. It's not really a part of this level, but I'll just mention something small. The challenge is when we bring too much here, it may cause confusion. But polydactyly, poly meaning many, dactyl meaning digits. Polydactyly, as you hear the word pentadactyl, it means having several digits. You're having several digits. So it means you have more than 5 digits on one limb. So you may find someone has, say, 5 digits on one hand and 6 on the other. Someone has 6 on one hand and 6 on the other. Others even have 6 toes on one leg and 6 toes on the other. In addition, they have 6 fingers on one hand and 6 fingers on the other. So there are different extents to which people exhibit polydactyly. Polydactyly is inherited. So if you have 6 fingers, there are high chances that your children will also have them. I didn't say that they must. I said there are higher chances. Things of genetics is about probability. There are certain traits you have that increase the probability or the chance of you getting or passing it on to the to your offspring. And there are others where the chance of you passing it down are very remote or very unlikely. I hope that helps to answer. And polydactyly is a dominant trait, by the way. So if you have it, there are higher chances of your children also getting it. But I said there are higher chances. I didn't say that they must get it, but there are very high chances. Okay, let's have another question.
Another question, let me see from the chat. Okay. Now, people are bringing in hormones, but because someone is asking what of those women with beards, and then there is another question now that connects with this topic. Is blood group AB homozygous or heterozygous?
Blood group AB is heterozygous. Even AO is heterozygous, even BO is heterozygous. AA is homozygous. Let me just show you here. Unfortunately, I wouldn't be talking about blood groups at this point, but let's just say it. So if you have AO, it means that one of your parents gave you A, the other one gave you what? O. Then if you have AA, it means both of your parents gave you, each of them gave you an A. If you get BO, it means one gave you A, the other gave you O. And then BB means both of them gave you B. And then AB means one of them was A, the other one was B. And then OO means both of them contributed an O. So these are the genotypes. Now here we call this blood group A. This is group A, because A is dominant to O, okay? Because A is dominant, okay? Dominant to O. Okay, that's why we call it. That's why we call it A, in spite of the presence of the O. This is A. It's obviously A because both of them are, because this is homozygous. This is B because O is recessive to B. And this is also B because both of them are identical, so no problem. Now this is AB. This is now what we call, okay, even this is heterozygous. Let me just also add it. It's also heterozygous. Okay, that's also heterozygous. Now this is homozygous. And also this is homozygous. I hope that helps to clarify. This is also homozygous. So the rest are heterozygous. This is homozygous. Any other question on this particular thing?
Ariela's hand is up.
Yes, please.
Ariela?
Okay, let's go to the next person.
Okay, still on the other question of the 6 fingers. He's asking, Ian is asking again that if he cuts them off, if he removes them, are there any chances of his children getting them? And then Fortune Rose replies saying that, okay, yes, even Diane says that it's still Crimson, it is still in your genetics, so I guess so. Then it doesn't mean that you have removed that gene. Fortune says that they still have, removing a finger doesn't terminate the gene.
Okay, those people have helped me. I don't think I need to add on anything.
Lastly,
removal of the finger will not stop it from being passed on. We need to learn to embrace who we are, the way we are. If God gave you a dark skin, take it the way it is. If gave you light skin, take it the way it is. If God gave you a tall body, that is it. Short, if you are, whatever shape God made you, that is who you are. You can't change it. The sooner you appreciate it, the more you'll be comfortable in your skin. And let's not body shame other people, because that is what causes all these insecurities and unhappiness. God had a good plan for each one of you, and that's why he created you the way you are. God had a plan to make you an African. There's a reason why you're not an American or New Zealander or whatever. The way you are is just perfect. So let's not try to cut off body parts because we are not happy with them, or try to enhance body parts because we want different body parts, okay?
All right,
any other questions?
Should type the answers in that chat. There are 4 more hands, but because of time, they can type their answers. Their questions, sorry, in the chat.
All right, let's move on. If the things they are talking about require my attention, I will certainly deal with them. Okay, now we already discussed this really, but let us put it here so that we can know what it is. This is genotype, phenotype. We've been talking about this severally before. Now we talk about the genotype and phenotype. The phenotype is simply what we observe, the characteristics that are observable in an organism. For instance, its physical appearance or its behavior. And the phenotype is always as a result of the interaction between the genes and the environment. Let me just put that here. It's very, very important. Your phenotype, the phenotype equals the genes, genotype, okay, it's just a genotype, plus environmental influence. I'll explain this in a bit. For instance, if you were supposed to be a tall person because your parents gave you those genes for height, and then you are malnourished in infancy, God forbid, okay? It means you may never reach your full potential because the environment has influenced your outcome, the phenotype. Let's look at plants. Plants serve as a good example. If you have a very good breed of beans, but you don't give it enough sunshine, or you don't give it manure, or you don't provide the right conditions, that means the environment is negatively impacting it. So this bean plant will never produce to its full potential until the environment around it is the right one. On the other hand, if I have a bean plant which doesn't produce so well, but I gave it all the water, the nutrients, then it will do certainly better than usual because of the environment I have created around it. So that's what a phenotype is all about. It's the interaction between the genotype and its environment. Now, the genotype is simply about the genetic makeup. It's about the genetic makeup. So you cannot change much about it. Sorry about that. The battery. Okay, are there any questions on this? Here we are, maybe to just illustrate this, I'd said this already. If you have homozygous dominant, capital B, if it's, the capital B is supposed to illustrate the allele for purple. It means, by all means, this will be a purple flowered plant. But if you have capital B, small b, it will still be purple because the presence of this capital B dominating the small b. So phenotypically, it is purple. Then if you have small b, homozygous recessive, it will be white. Now, it's very important to know that whatever appears doesn't tell the true picture of what is within this organism. You may see a purple flowered plant and think that it is a pure plant, but yet it is a mix. It's not pure. Why isn't it pure? Because one of its alleles is recessive and the other is dominant. So if you went and planted these seeds from this plant, you'll be shocked in the next generation when you get a mixture of offspring. And you wonder, why is this the case? Did this person cheat me? Probably not, unless they told it was pure. Because when we have the outcome as purple, it doesn't always mean that the organism was always a homozygous dominant. It doesn't mean that. It's like you take home a breed which looks like maybe a breed for dogs. It looks like a German Shepherd. Maybe because one of its parents was a German Shepherd and the other one was maybe another dog. And now when it reaches home, it produces puppies. And then you see the puppies, some of them are not in any way similar to German Shepherds. And you start wondering, it means that this dog you brought was a mixed breed, or what we call a hybrid. It was never a pure breed. So that's why it's important to establish the genotype of the organism, not to rely on the phenotype alone. And that's why we do test crossing. We shall talk about test crossing if time does allow. I think we have some few minutes on us. So a test cross is a genetic experiment that we conduct in order to know the true genotype of an organism, because the phenotype may be misleading. And for instance, you may be a farmer who is interested in raising cows for milk production or for beef. That means you must be interested in homozygous organisms. Because if you have homozygous organisms, it means that no matter how many times you breed them, they'll always give you the same outcome. If I get capital B, and I mate it with capital B, I'll always get offspring that are capital B. If I get small b, and I mate it with small b, all the outcomes will be white flowered, no matter how many times I do it. But if I go to one which is capital B small b, and I crossed it with the one which is capital B small b, what we call, right, we self-fit, then you're going to get something that is very interesting. And that brings me to the next slide. Let's remove this. So in the next slide, we are going to see, before we go to the next slide, there's what we call the principle of segregation of alleles during gamete formation. So what happens is that when gametes are being formed, remember the mother or the parent cell has a pair of alleles. See this? One from the father and one from the mother. So assuming this is a female egg cell, which is going to form daughter cells, which we call ova. So if this female egg cell carries capital T and small t, it means at meiosis, half of the gametes will carry capital T and the other half will carry small t. In other words, these alleles, much as they are always appearing in pairs in a cell, during gamete formation, they are separated. And gamete formation occurs by the process called meiosis. So this separation of alleles during meiosis is what we call segregation. So this segregation is very important because it allows organisms not to have excess genes, excess chromosomes or less chromosomes. So this is basically the principle of segregation of alleles, or the law of segregation. We say that each individual organism that is diploid, you can see this is diploid because it has two alleles, okay? That during meiosis, these alleles segregate or separate from each other such that each gamete, you see these are gametes, are going to have one of the two alleles. So you see the two alleles, but the gamete has one of the two alleles. Now this is for the gene maybe of height. Now, when meiosis takes place, the two alleles that control height must separate, and each goes its separate ways in a gamete. You not have capital T in one gamete, and this one would have to be empty. Okay, so instead you have small t and capital T. So this is what we call the segregation of alleles. Now this is very important because it will help us appreciate what we call the monohybrid cross. Now in the monohybrid cross, we are starting with parents whose genotype is capital T, and small t. Phenotypically, these parents, this one is tall. We are looking at pea plants, by the way. we are looking at the pea plants. So some pea plants may appear tall and others may appear as dwarfs. Now, during meiosis, I actually need to put here the word meiosis. So during meiosis, we have gamete formation. Okay, put the word meiosis here. We have gamete formation. So when we have gamete formation, it means we are going to have each gamete carrying only one set of the two alleles. Okay, so here actually there's capital T, capital T. We should have drawn two of them here, but since all of them are capital T, we can just write one. And here, since all of them are small t, we can just put one. So when we have fertilization, random fertilization, that's the word that's missing in this space. Fertilization, it means that any one of those male gametes can fuse with any one of the other female gametes. So that's why we call it random fertilization. So when you have random fertilization, it means that we are going to have offspring that are capital T, small t, because these gametes were only made of capital T and these ones are only made of small t. So the offspring are capital T, small t. But because capital T is dominant, then all the F1, the first generation, all the F1 are going to be heterozygous. But phenotypically, they appear tall, but genotypically, they are heterozygous. Now, when we do a self-cross means that you are getting organisms with the same phenotypic characteristic and you mate them with organisms with the same phenotypic characteristic. So we get these tall plants from this, and you mate them with other tall plants from the same experiment. So when we do that, again, remember meiosis takes place, and the gametes are going to the alleles are going to segregate. So when they segregate, we put each allele in its separate compartment. We are calling the gamete. And then when we have random fertilization here, we get something very interesting. Fertilization. So notice that here, this one fuses with this to form capital T, capital T. If this one instead fused with this, then we have capital T, small t. What about this one? If it fused with this, then we get capital T, small t. But if it fused with the other, then we get small t, small t. So it means that we are going to get an F2 generation, which has genotypes which are not similar. Notice we have capital T, small t, capital T, small t, capital T, small t, and small t, small t. Yet here, all of them had the same genotype. So this tells you that whenever you have heterozygotes, okay, or heterozygous organisms, they'll always give you offspring that are a mixture. So you find that 3 out of 4 of them are tall, where 1 is a dwarf. So that's why we come up to that 3-to-1 ratio. 3-to-1 ratio. Yes, Gloria.
Teacher, I just want to know the factors that lead to the separation of alleles.
The alleles separate during meiosis. We discussed meiosis in the previous discussion. When meiosis takes place, I think I should put it here. Okay, let's put it here. It's covering some words, but it's in this gap. When meiosis takes place, then those alleles will have to separate from each other. Yes, Galesco? Telescope, please unmute.
Okay, teacher, I want you to help me and repeat for me that page because I've not understood anything there. About the
This very
monohybrid
page?
cross. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to repeat it. Hello? Hello, ask your question.
So what if somebody lost all their tall cells? Okay, that allow them to have height. What would happen?
You can't lose them. Your body has billions of cells.
Like what if in all the cells in the body, he lost them? And this led to, like maybe due to gamma radiations or something like that.
Okay, talk about mutations. Well, mutations can certainly change your genotype, but I want to think it wouldn't be that drastic like the way you are saying it. Usually mutations will cause you to suffer from cancers and things like that. But I don't see them changing your genotype that now you were male, then you become a female, or you are tall and you become short. That is something of science fiction. Okay, someone has a name, Sweet Venom.
When you unmute, you introduce yourself, then you give the question. Your name?
So, good afternoon.
What's your name?
Bella. Bella.
Please
It's
go
okay,
ahead,
go
Bella.
on.
So,
Go ahead.
since on the screen there is monohybrid cross, is there a heterohybrid cross?
No, the other one would be dihybrid cross, but that one is for A level. Monohybrid cross is just where you are looking at the inheritance of a single pair of characters, a single pair of contrasting characters. Here the contrasting characters are tallness and shortness. But if we were to say tallness and purple leaves, shortness and the green leaves, now we are looking at two pairs of contrasting characters. That is now dihybrid, which is beyond our level for now. But you study that in S5 next year. So monohybrid inheritance or monohybrid cross is just looking at a pair of contrasting characteristics. The mono means one, one pair. Okay, now let me explain to the person who asked earlier before we run out of time. We have about only 4 minutes. Now, if you look at what I have posted on the screen, we are starting from what we call pure breeds. These parents are of pure breeds. If you look at my cursor, now this parent is appearing tall. That's how we see them phenotypically. And this parent is appearing as a dwarf. That's what they look like phenotypically. Now, of course, we always start by saying let the allele, actually you should always start by defining your symbols. Let's say let capital T represent, oh, I already have it here. Sorry, I don't have to repeat it. Let capital T represent the allele for tallness. Okay. Now, if that is the case, and small t represents the allele for dwarfness, then now we can go ahead and use our symbols. So it means that if this one is appearing tall and it's a pure breed, then must be homozygous T, capital T. And if this one is a pure breed and it's appearing as a dwarf, then must be homozygous small t. Because pure breeds always are homozygous. Now, when these parents undergo gamete formation, they are going to produce gametes that have the same traits as their parent cells. Okay. Same traits as the parent cell. So what happens is that if we had capital T, then they must segregate. They must segregate. And when they do segregate, then all the offspring will have capital T. Okay, as you see here. Then here, all of them will have small t because the origin was their parent also had small t. Now, when these gametes are formed, then they undergo fertilization. It means that the capital T will fuse with a small t, then we have this. So the offspring of two pure breeds, we call that the first filial generation, F1 generation. F1 means first filial generation. So all of them are going to appear tall. Phenotypically, they are tall. But genotypically, what we don't see on the outside is that they are actually heterozygous. So if we want to prove whether they are heterozygous, then we must carry out a test cross. But before we do that, what if we took it a step further and said, okay, let us self them and see what happens, just out of curiosity. So we self, when I say self, it's crossing two related individuals. In human terms, it would be like incest. Okay, so you're having this offspring crossed with self with another offspring, and then we are having these gametes formed, and then this is the outcome. Now notice that the outcome here is that phenotypically speaking, 3 out of the 4 of them are tall, and 1 out of the 4 of them is actually a dwarf. So you have a 3-to-1 phenotypic ratio. But we have what we call the genotypic ratio, which would be 1-to-2-to-1. Let me just show it here. Let me put it here. Let's put it here. Oops. Okay. So this is 1-to-2-to-1. So that is the genotypic ratio. But phenotypic is 3-to-1. I hope that helps to answer the queries. We are running out of time. Let's take just a few things and then we call it a day. Yes, Pauna? Okay, it seems there's nothing to ask. I'm going to ask one of us to say a closing prayer and thank God for the stable network we've had all this far without any interruptions. Any person who is, yes, Kawala, Andrea. Please go ahead and say a short prayer, thanking God for the lesson.
Let us pray in the name
Give
of
you a
the
chance to ask a question since you've given us a prayer as well.
Sorry, Andrea, please unmute.
Let us pray in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Loving Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the stable network we have had. We thank you for enabling the teachers help us. And we pray that whatever we have learned may be able to understand and revise more. In Jesus' name I've prayed. Holy Spirit.
Amen. Thank you, Andrea.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Okay. Let us call it a day. Go and make yourself useful.